Hey, everybody. Welcome back to your Dawn of Autonomy podcast. I'm Dawn Zoldi, your host and the CEO of P3 Tech Consulting. We are in a month that we've dedicated to the theme of OEM system and software leaders and is sponsored by Sage Tech Avionics. But today we are super fortunate to have with us Bronwyn Morgan. She is the CEO of multiple companies. Zio Air is one we're going to talk about today, Airversity. She also does the Zio cast, the podcast, and so much more. So it's great to have you on the show, Bronwyn.
Thank you so much. It's great being here.
There's so much this woman has going on. It's really, really hard to keep up. But today we're going to have some, I think, what we're going to call reveals about some hardware she's got coming out and some of the other things she's got going on since we last spoke. So it's so wonderful to have you back on the show, Bronwyn. You were on episode 54, and I know we're well over 100 at this point. So it's been a while since we talked, and you've been on our full crew. We were talking about robots this past year. So always wonderful to have you. Bronwyn, for those that don't know about your background, can you give them a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. So I spent many years in corporate working for some of the biggest Fortune 500 companies in the world, mostly in work of strategy, sales, innovation, and bringing new ideas to market. And also worked at the university level as associate director in entrepreneurship and innovation at Georgia State. And then I've been an innovation consultant working with Fortune 500 companies on future-proofing strategies. And so, always migrated back to a role that was revolving around innovation, new ideas. And so that really does seem to, be that's my thing. And, started this drone pilot journey after many, many, many years of loving aviation and aerospace back in 2016, I believe it was. And so, got the stripes like everybody else, the 107, the drone pro and safety rep. And here I am with these couple of companies that you've mentioned, really dedicated to making a mark in the industry to solve problems at the end of the day.
Yeah, well, you're all about solving problems. And let's talk about Zio Air first. So, first of all, tell us what Zio Air is all about. And then, secondly, why you created it.
Well, Zio has taken a pivot, Dawn, and I know that, I've kind of shared a little bit with you, but forever, Zio was, drone services, AI-based drone services, data analytics, and autonomous systems. And I moved the and autonomous systems, or actually I moved the drone services and data analytics over to our other company, Airversity, and maintained this autonomous systems OEM status. And so we are a position rather. So we are now a designer and manufacturer of American-made drones, and all the services are somewhere else because there's such an incredible market demand. I think everybody in our industry recognizes this and the need for it, and there's so many different niches that you can jump into. And so Zio is positioning itself as a drone that is smart, weather resilient, and has this capability to provide the level of high performance that's needed for commercial sectors or the commercial sector with various and different verticals within that sector. So this is what I'm feverishly, working away on right now.
Yes, yes, I know you've been super busy, and we're so happy that you took this time. And if you didn't catch that, everybody, that was the big reveal. So Zio Air has made a pivot. This is very significant. This company, Bronwyn, started it in 2020, and been doing drone service provider work across primarily critical infrastructure and also disaster response, if I recall correctly. And that now is fitted under Airversity, with Zio Air being an OEM leader, we hope, here soon. So I want to talk about this drone a little bit if you're willing to do that. But before we do, let's talk a little bit about these services that you provide, because you're going to continue providing them under the Airversity. And I know we've got at least an image or two that's super fun. Maybe we can pop up here as we're talking. So tell us a little bit about these different verticals that you've been involved in as a drone service provider, working not only yourself, but with other pilots. And did that work, Bronwyn, inspire you to create this new drone? So tell us more.
Well, Airversity now, the corporation has two elements to it. One side, Airversity Drone Pilot Academy, which has been around and known for professional drone pilot training for commercial, industrial, and public safety pilots. 107, and then flight training, very specific sensor training and certifications, and we've also now taken those drone services that were a part of ZEO and the data analytics of it all and moved that over now to a new brand called Air Echo. So Air Echo is the services side and Airversity drone training is the training side. So both of those live under this umbrella of the Airversity Corporation. So we are still very much focused on critical infrastructure when it comes to the drone services, telecom, energy utilities, as well as civil infrastructure and disaster, and then also climate and environment, because there's a very interesting adjacency between the data, and I'm very much highly engaged in climate and weather, and I have to thank our friend Don Berchoff for indoctrinating me even more deeply into
Yes, the Weather
world.
Dawn. We love him. Yes.
Yes. And so I'm fascinated by it. And I believe that when we look at the rich data that's coming from the impact that climate is having on disasters, I mean, just turn the news on, and how it's impacting our infrastructure as well. Now, granted, those aren't the only things impacting infrastructure. They degrade on their own. But I think we recognize how fragile our entire system is when it comes to um, our infrastructure and ensuring that customers stay up and on so that the end user is able to live life effectively is so important to me, because when it's not there, chaos breaks out. And so I'm very much, connected to this idea of weather, climate, infrastructure, and then what the story is telling us and how we need to be prepared to address it.
Well, and all these verticals that you're doing under, now keep me straight. Air Echo.
Air Echo.
Okay, and this is falling under Airversity. You can see, everybody, what I meant when I said this woman is very busy. Like, I thought I'm opening up a new platform. We can talk about that at the end, but in 2025. But keeping track of everything you're doing, and I agree with you 100%, Bronwyn, because the connection between weather and climate and technology is just becoming more and more prevalent as we look at it. With everything going on in California, I just read an article like that fire is actually creating its own weather.
Yeah.
All right. And so, and what are people using drones for in support of combating that fire, in the recovery phases, even in the prevention phase? I'm actually speaking on this topic at GeoGov this very week in Washington, D.C., the idea of drones and disasters with an emphasis on wildfires. So this is sadly not something that's going away, but absolutely something where we need people like you using their neurons, putting their neurons against how technology can help us deal with, Mother Nature and everything that is flowing from that. So let's talk about Airversity, the training side for a second, because like you, although I can't say like you, Bronwyn, because you're a real drone pilot. I actually am a licensed drone pilot, but I'll just leave it at that. Like, you do not want me flying drones. Really, I took a week-long course at CSU, drone center up there. It was awesome. I took the test, obviously passed, but I wanted the experience of it. I wanted to know what pilots had to go through to get that, and it wasn't easy. I mean, I'm a quick study, and I have a really good kind of photographic memory. So I was able to memorize things, and be very successful in the test. But when it came to the stick and rudder stuff, not so much. And so what you do at Airversity is both, right? You teach them the book learning, but you also get them outside, with their hands on the drones and actually out and flying. So tell us about that.
Exactly. And we are definitely dedicated to the professional training, because a lot of folks are in this industry. I think there are 825,000 852 registered drone pilots by the FAA. And there are a lot of people that, just they got their 107 and they got their little drones and they're out there, and I love that. But they're like, hey, I'm ready to go do some stuff. I'm ready to go to inspect some things, and it's like, well,
And they're not, I'll tell you right away, they're not ready to inspect critical infrastructure. They're not ready to be involved in disaster response off the bat, right? Because these, or beyond visual line of sight. That was a big emphasis at commercial UAV this past week. It's not like, hey, if a 108 comes out, you're just good to like fly your drone outside of your, no, like
no.
these are very complex operations. So tell us more.
Yeah, no, so you're right. And, a lot of people become very disappointed and disenchanted when, well, no, you're going to need a different type of drone to do this work and these kinds of sensors. And they go and look at how much it costs and they're like, oh, well, wait a minute. And so I'm like, let's talk about what you're best suited to do right now as you grow your experience. And do you want to work as a freelancer or do you want to go to work for a company?
Yeah.
And those, very two very different things, but you're going to need a lot of stick time in a
Yeah.
lot of different circumstances to be effective at this and really understand these sensors, because at the end of the day, this is about gathering data. And are you effective in really being able to read a mission plan? How to deviate from that plan while on site, if need be, based on a variety of different factors. And are you considering all of those things in the type of equipment that you're buying? I mean, I even listen to people who talk about um, uh, different projects, and they're like, "Oh, I'm getting ready to go do this project." I'm like, "That's great." And I'm like, "Just make sure you got your insurance." And they're like, "Well, wait a minute," because I'm big on insurance right now, and I'm like, you need your aviation aerospace insurance. You're going to need your liability, professional liability as a company owner. You need that clearly, and you're going to need your cyber insurance, and then depending on the situation, you may need nuclear insurance. I mean, it's like
Well,
all of these.
I mean, of course, you want whole insurance if you just spend a lot of money on your drone and sensor and have that equipment. If
Exactly.
something happens and you don't have that insurance, you're SOL, right?
Are.
So,
There's no
um,
recovery from it.
yeah. So how I want to ask you really how this works on both sides of the Airversity umbrella, the training piece. I've seen on LinkedIn and on Instagram and other places, Bronwyn, where you've advertised, hey, we've got this course coming up. People they generally come to you live, but you also have online opportunities. Is that
Yeah.
right? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so the 107 is online. We do a live version if it's, because some people call me and they're like, hey, I've done a 107 online program, but I want more. I want to make sure I really get this because none of this stuff's intuitive. You got to know it.
Yeah.
And so we'll do that. And we're focused again on organizations, agencies, corporations, enterprises. We don't necessarily do just Joe off the street or Janet off the street. Um, but if for those folks, I'm like, hey, go get your 107 first, and then we'll take you through after you get your drone and your insurance, because we need to know that you really are serious here. Then we will, get you through either our uh, intro flight training and intermediate, and then we're also doing this with flight training I'm sorry, with public safety as well. And so we just signed up as a provider with SOAR, which is MITRE's program,
I
to
saw that.
provide.
Congratulations. I met the MITRE
Yeah,
guys, the MITRE
forward to it.
team, yeah, at the Drone Responder Summit this past year.
Yeah,
And I knew they were launching, they were really in the midst of launching SOAR, this idea of having, no kidding, like standards for
exactly.
what that should look like for public safety. And it's great that you're teaming up with them. So you are the trainer for the hands-on learning for public safety with MITRE.
Exactly. Mhm.
Wow. Okay. Amazing. All
Yeah.
right. And all of this, I assume, Bronwyn, is on what, an Airversity website?
Yeah, airversity.com. When you get in there, it'll take you either through, you can click on the training side or the Air Echo side. Both brands pop up with the logos, and then you can go in and either on the Air Echo side, if you want to be a pilot, you can sign up to be a pilot. If you want to be a customer, you can sign up to be a customer. If you just want information, you can email us from there. And then on the Airversity side, the same thing. You can see all of our classes and contact us. And so
So
again,
I have a question about the Air Echo side then as a drone pilot.
mhm.
You say you've trained them or they come highly skilled because they've been involved in some of these complex operations. They want to plug into your network and become an Air Echo, let's just say contractor. How does that work?
Yeah, so all of our, currently 95% of our crew are contractors, and so you come in, we've got a lot of details for you to fill out. We need your 107 number. Are you current? Your insurance information. We need all that, and then once opportunities and your experience and your equipment, once opportunities that meet your, your background and experience come up in your area, then we're able to tap into you for those kinds of projects. Um, and so right now we're actually onboarding quite a few folks on the pilot side and on the instructor side. But we oftentimes are looking for very specific skills for certain projects. So we've got some folks who are like, hey, I've done this before, and it's like, that's great. We need to know what your experience is, because once we put you out there, there'll be some initial training, kind of getting you up to speed on what this project is, but we're not going to come out and then show you how to actually fly a telecom tower. That's a separate class altogether. If you know how to do it, we're going to say, here are the requirements for this particular project. Now we expect you to be able to go do that. So it's not a hands-on training kind of thing. You got to know what you're doing.
Yeah.
And that's true for both sides of the house. But we do make sure that people are well steeped in the requirements of our projects, what to, making sure that we communicate effectively. But yeah, so if you've got it and you've got the skills, and people always say, well, how do I get experience? And I'm like, well, start off with things at a level that are, commensurate with your equipment. And it could, you might be doing roof inspections at Wendy's, but you learning to use, a thermal camera or just video, depending on what the customer needs. And you're able to learn how to really work that drone, understand the dynamics of when you're operating in a public setting. So all those things are important. And I always tell people, if you can't get it as a freelancer, just go work for a company. And then that way you've got the coverage of working for them, and you can actually now, go out and do real work, because as a freelancer, sometimes it can be a very much a challenge.
Yeah, I mean, again, it just depends on the kind of work you want to do. I mean, the work you do, in particular, is very highly technical in nature. Speaking of technical, on the back end, Bronwyn, you mentioned analytics. I know you've been involved in AI before it was, Chat GPT and these large language models, and everybody's throwing around AI. We're AI, kind of infused or AI, whatever. But you've been working in this space for a while. You've been following it, advising Fortune 500 companies, as you mentioned. Future proofing. How does it work in terms of that analytics side for Air Echo, or even Airversity training? Are you teaching people how to employ AI on analytics, or do you have a specific software, either proprietary or that you've contracted with or purchased, that you're then also providing those the analytical backbone on the back end to give people actionable intelligence out of the data that's being collected?
You That last statement was spot on. It really is about the actionable intelligence, and we are developing that proprietary AI or machine, database, if you will. It's extremely, extremely expensive. Um, gathering data first of all, real data is a process. Secondly,
Yeah.
if you use synthetic data, how good is that data? And then training your models. I mean, this is where the rubber meets the road.
Yeah.
And we're in a data incubator with one of the federal research centers in the, I forgot which department it was, in AWS, in helping us design our initial models. And it is not, I think there's some things on the market that make it a little bit easier in some instances, but it's still going to cost you, because how are you managing that data? How are you storing that data? Is it usable? And now as you bring in real data from customers, how are you able to analyze that effectively, predictive, prescriptive, descriptive? I think I said those three. And what does the customer want, and are they willing to pay for it? So there's a lot going on the back end, because everybody's pushing this AI. It's expensive, and are you able to charge for it? Now, we are using some off-the-shelf products. I won't get into the who's, it's the usual
Sure.
suspects in when it comes to data processing and baseline analytics. The other thing that I'm finding is, can customers really use it effectively? What is it that you're going to tell them that is so incredibly unique based on their problems, their issues, and what they've asked you to go do? So
Yeah.
there's a simultaneous growth going on between growing the data and then using the data, because once the customer gets the data, the next question is, are they able to integrate that effectively into their existing data sets, or is this a whole new level of intelligence that they're trying to figure out how do they use? And so not every customer is able to embrace and utilize that. So I think it's going to be a while before we really see it grow and develop from a machine learning perspective of how to really utilize it. Like everything else, everything becomes a buzzword when it's hot. You could say that, we're tomorrow is hot bananas, and everybody be like, oh yeah, we got a hot banana solution.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, well, what does that do, and why does that matter?
Yeah.
And so I think that for us, as we've, literally as a small startup, we've, been crawling along on this data piece, because it's a lot to get your arms around.
Yeah.
Make sure that it's real and it's actionable, because there can be a lot of noise in the system. But that being said, we are able to provide customers with what they need at this point in time to get the job done. And what we will provide will be incredibly rich and have a lot of components to it, not just the imagery that we've captured, but we will be adding other elements into it that really embrace the entire story and environment in which their assets are living and operating.
So you all heard it here first. Again, developing proprietary software. And I love how you're just like, oh yeah, I'm working with AWS over here. I'm working with MITRE over here. I mean, folks, if you're not getting kind of the scope and scale and the importance that this incredible person that I'm talking to brings to the industry, wow, you're just not getting it, because she's getting things done, and with some of the biggest companies and names in the industry. So amazing, all the things you're doing. Let's talk about this drone, because you and your drone service pilot network are out there doing these highly complex operations on a daily basis in sometimes horribly adverse conditions, such as in the disaster scenarios. um, at some point, Bronwyn, you looked around and said, okay, I bought this drone, I bought that drone and that drone, but what I'm missing are these things, and I'm going to make my own. So tell us about that journey, kind of what inspired you to create your own drone, and what will make this drone, by the way, if it has a name, I'd love to hear it, different than some of the other things we're getting off the shelf right now.
Yeah, can't reveal any names just yet.
All right, all right.
But I think like all of us, and I recognize this as soon as I came in the industry, and I was talking to folks, and they were saying, yeah, the government, at least on the military side, I believe, I think I don't know if it was the Army, I can't remember right this minute, but that said no to the largest Chinese drone manufacturer.
Yeah,
And I
yeah,
was like, okay, this is interesting. I mean, I had one, I have one, I have a couple.
yeah,
And of course, over time, for a lot of different geopolitical reasons, um, we're migrating away from that. However, good technology. And so there's clearly a recognition that we need solutions here in the United States.
yeah,
And a lot of companies are, working to solve this problem. And everybody thinks, oh, I'm going to be the primary one. There's enough for everybody. And this I got to have it all thing is a strange concept, but
yeah.
um, uh, there's enough for everybody because I think that now that we know more about drones and how they operate, we can really determine what's needed for very specific use cases.
Yeah.
And that's something that I recognize in talking to people, talking to customers, talking to pilots, and realizing like, we need things that operate. In a manner that are, high performance driven. I want to, just like many of us who've been using drones that are not American based, um, the precision and the ability to, stop on a dime and hover and, return home and have this kind of very user friendly interface. Because even if you are highly technically engaged, who
Hmm.
wants to be messing around with a bunch of dials and buttons in software if you don't have to? Once you
Right.
get your systems right, yeah, you get everything set, then you go. And I think a lot of us want more plug and play. And I think we're seeing it in everything that we do, from the grocery store to our automobiles. And so for me, I recognize that there was a need for some ease and additional smartness, as we throw that word around a lot. And so, can we build a drone that operates like a little flying person, in the sky, this little pilot, if you will, that is able to, based on the mission that has been pre-planned, operate autonomously, beyond visual line of sight in multiple conditions. Because I'm the weather girl over here,
Yeah.
and in terms of being able, because so much downtime, and I noticed this early on when I was talking to Don Berchoff, and I'm like, hey, there's just times of the year where we can't do this. It's just too cold, it's too rainy, it's too tornado-y, and we need to be able to operate more, all the time. And granted, there's this thing called physics where, there's certain things you can do and certain things you can't. If I'm in an A380 and I'm bouncing around in turbulence, I know that, this little stinger up there in the air is going to have its challenges. But being able to provide customers with equipment that does have that kind of performance to operate in high winds and in certain levels of precipitation, and still operate smartly, is what we are focused on, and be able to operate whether you're flying it, as a pilot, or if you are operating it autonomously, as we are moving into BVLOS. Um, and so we want to be able to provide that kind of solution, and of course, as long range as possible. Um, one of our biggest challenges as an industry is weight for this payload, as well as our ability from a fuel source perspective. And so, how are we able to maximize that to get the most out of it, to make it still user friendly from a fuel perspective, battery perspective, hydrogen perspective, and be able to operate long range to capture data when customers need it most. They don't need it just when the sun's shining. And so we want to help fill that gap.
Wow. Okay. You just threw out a lot of words, a lot of, I was just in Vegas last week, Bronwyn. We missed you there, Commercial UAV Expo. And, for the first time, really, I felt like on the floor, multiple heavy lifters. And when I say heavy lifters, you use a word that I think, you said fuel, you said hydrogen. And what we were seeing, I think, for the first time was multiple hybrid configurations. Maybe you'd see one, you would never see like a hydrogen drone, like outright. Heaven Drones was there, right? So really interesting that people are, they're leaning into beyond visual line of sight. Like you said, they know I got to go the distance if I'm going beyond. It's going to have a heavy payload probably because it's going to be some kind of a, an advanced sensor package on this bird, and the ability to do this smartly, whether that means fully autonomously or being able to take it over, whatever that means exactly. I think that's something on a lot of people's mind. I think you're coming into this right at the right time. I'm super excited for the big reveal and when we're going to get to see and know the name of this drone that you are building. My thought is, if Bronwyn's building, it's going to be awesome. So the interesting thing is, Bronwyn, too. You know a lot about the industry, as do I, because like me, you interview a lot of people. So for those that don't know, Bronwyn is also the host and creator of the Zeocast podcast. Um, and so tell us a little bit about that, because I know for me personally, with everything I do, I've become like a student of the industry uh, by hearing stories like yours and learning what you're doing and other companies. What inspired Zeocast and kind of where are you going with it? I mean, because you're so busy doing all of these other things, will it continue on, or are you handing that off? What's that looking like?
Good questions. So yeah, I have interviewed some incredible people and learned so much by listening to them. I'm like, oh, I didn't know that was a thing. Despite even coming up with the questions and asking them, certain things. But yeah, we started Zeocast as an audio podcast, and it's on all the. I think it's changed now because so many have come and gone. But um, Spotify, you can find us there, and then we moved to a more video cast, if you will, with all the shows. Like I would bring my crew, Jeff, and we would film at AUVSI, and we did CUAV. And so the last one we did was San Diego. And so you will start to see a refreshed Zeocast coming to the table in the fall. I mean, I guess we're a couple couple of weeks away.
We're in it now. They're already selling pumpkin
Oh,
spice latte. Next thing you know, there's Christmas decorations will be in the
that's
stores, but
right.
that'll probably be in a
Right.
week. But yeah.
So it's coming. And so some new guests, because we were focused on geospatial, AI, drones, and everything else in that space. And um, also, I host the Airversity Drone Pilot Hangar if I don't have enough to do.
Oh,
And
that's right. Yeah, I was on that. And yes, I
uh,
forget about
you're
that
coming
one.
up. We've
Yeah.
got you coming up in November, I believe. And so that is where we create a space for drone pilots to come together and just listen to, we've had MITRE on, we've had Mark Janoong on talking about the Nevada test site. We've got Marcy Eisenberg coming up next week to talk about Elevate, but to really hear what's going on in the industry from some of the best and brightest minds of what's happening, and ask questions and have a place to be engaged. And that's also my thing. It's about a sense of community
Yeah.
because it is such a tight knit small community. So those are the two places where you can see me more on our both YouTube. There's a Zeocast YouTube as well as the Airversity Drone Pilot Hangar, and then you can also find Zeocast on Spotify, Apple, and a few others.
Speaking of seeing you, you were recently a TED Talk speaker,
Was.
and so tell us about this.
Yeah, so I bounced between Atlanta and St. Louis, and I did that. I was just so lucky to get to work with the folks at TEDx St. Louis, and for their women's event, which was just this past Friday, I got to have an interview. My talk was done in an interview format to talk about life, navigating life and business in the sky. And I talked about, my journey. I talked about drones and what we do. I talked about drone delivery, in terms of the future, some things that are coming up. And then I talked about urban air mobility and flying vehicles, cargo, emergency management, but really just kind of giving people this kind of immersion into our industry, kind of the top line. And I went from being my favorite inspiration always will be Lieutenant Uhura from Star Trek. I'm a Trekkie for life, and Nichelle Nichols really did it for me. And then I
Yep.
talked about being Wonder Woman and that I can fly over, now and gather data, like in my invisible plane,
Yep. Yep.
if you will, which is a drone. And then I talked about being, now Judy Jetson as we go into, this whole new future. So that was incredibly exciting. And it'll be available probably next week or so, I think, when they do all the editing. And some other incredible speakers were on stage with me.
Well, make sure you tag me on that. I would love to watch it. Before the show, Bronwyn and I were talking, and I was saying how I did a TED also, but I did the, kind of the monologuing 11-minute exactly slides, minimal slide choreographed version, and how stressful that was. But you can check out my TED on P3 Tech Consulting under About. I actually have the link there. It's called Life, Lawyers, and Leadership. And basically, that's where the inspiration for my company, P3 Tech, P3, it was about the three Ps. So I'm not going to reveal what those are. Check it out. Super stressful, but I'm really glad I did it. And it was an awesome experience. So mine was Schriever, TEDx Schriever Air Force Base,
Oh,
which is now a space base. But at the, yeah. So it was pretty cool, but very, very fun. So you could see this woman is all over, not only like designing proprietary software and a brand new drone that's going to come out. When is that thing coming out?
well, we certainly are looking to mid 2020, excuse me, mid to late 2025.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Awesome. So next year, big year. Bronwyn, I think next year is going to be a big year across the board. Obviously for you, Zeo Air, Airversity. Uh, you have a third company, or is it a nonprofit? It's an AAM focused one. What is it called?
Yeah.
Move,
So glad you brought
MUUV
it.
or something?
It's Move, and it's on the back burner because
Okay, all right. So she actually put
burners.
something
Yeah,
off of her plate. Because I remember, so everybody, Bronwyn is a woman to watch, what they used to call woman to watch, award winner from Women in Drones. This was a couple years ago. I know I did some coverage in Inside Unmanned Systems magazine on you and your other colleagues that were selected that particular year. And I remember that was one of the things that you had also created an AAM focused thing. But I think it's probably is smart to maybe focus on all the things we just talked about first,
yeah,
because look, we got to get part 108, right? We've got to get beyond visual line of sight going. The American made drone situation and whatever's happening with that. And then, like air taxis, I know all those air taxi companies out there, all those eVTOL companies, they're talking about certifying the first one by the end of next year. But what does that mean? And maybe flying initial operating capability at the 2028 LA Olympics. Well, Paris promised us that too, and there was nothing flying. I mean, I
right.
think Volocopter might have had their velocity doing something, but it wasn't certainly ubiquitous air
Yeah,
taxi operations all over
weren't being
Paris.
dropped and picked up and delivered. And you're right. Um, the one thing that I also recognize is sometimes we kind of get out so far ahead, and that's what innovators do. And so I
Yeah,
embrace that. But then we develop things that once we get closer to it, it's like, yeah, well, that's not what we really need. We need this. And so
yeah,
you spend a lot of time and money on, stuff that isn't necessary. So I think as we build these others and because we've been having some internal conversations about this other um, company and what do we do with it? Do we integrate it in what we have, or do we wait to see how the market develops? And I
yeah.
think there's so many unknowns still.
Yeah. Well, look, I think even the drone industry, there still are. I mean, even just going to commercial UAV and walking the floor, there's been some death and dying, right? Like, let's call it what it is. And absolutely consolidation, some integrate, a lot more integrations, I'd say, people like looking for holistic solutions end to end, which I think is a smart way to go. So, we'll see what happens, but, as we look to 2025, Bronwyn, and you're looking kind of out in your crystal ball here, we see a drone in your future. We see maybe some proprietary software that's going to give that kind of actionable intelligence from that data on the back end. More courses, more collaborations. What else are we seeing on your horizon as we kind of come into Q4 of 2024 and jump into 2025?
I mean, you've nailed it. There's nothing else I can add to this list. Uh,
Well, I mean, I think you said more podcasts and everything like
yeah,
that.
that'll
Yeah,
be coming.
yeah,
But it really is going to be heads down, because you can become very inundated with invites and events and conferences and
yeah,
uh, meetings, and I love all that. But it's, we're going into, it's winter, so we're going into hibernation
yeah.
as we kind of,
You're going in the crunch time.
yeah, so that we can kind of tinker, and work on some things, and then, come out with some shiny new things for 2025. But we will have some fireside opportunities to have dialogue and some very unique spaces, around topics that most people may not even recognize are impacting our industry. It's those things. It's like, oh, I didn't even think about that. So that's what we hope to bring in here in the, in the short term.
Well, I hope I can entice you back to Law Tech Connect in 2025 in Houston. It's going to be at the end of May. We're already talking to people about building out that faculty deck, and you've been such a great partner on that, Bronwyn. Just real quick, speaking of shiny new things, just telling everybody out there, big reveal here on this end. I'm opening up a digital media platform called Autonomy Global on January 1st, 2025 is when it will officially launch. And so original article content, place to hang press releases finally. People send me them all the time, Bronwyn. I got nowhere to put them. Now I will. And everything we do, Bronwyn, all of the podcasts, all the Law Tech Connect, everything is going to be fully integrated with Autonomy Global. Lots of new white papers coming out, an article for everything we do. So super excited. Talk to you offline about media partnership, but yeah, I think 2025 is just going to be a really interesting and big year for the industry, clearly for you, Bronwyn, and Zio Air and Airversity and everything you're doing, and hopefully for P3 Tech, which, by the way, 5th year anniversary. It's a big year for us. So
Wow!
yeah,
Congratulations!
yeah, it's
Fine.
year five, and
Wow.
this kind of evolution from drones at dawn with Interdrone and my buddy Mike in the background here, Mike Peel, and
Right.
then changing that to Dawn of Drones, starting with Drone Life, we still love and work with, and then moving over to AVSI, and then rebranding to Dawn of Autonomy. So it's just on the podcast side, opening up Full Crew, and then how that's evolved. So many things over the last 5 years. It's been awesome. I'm having so much fun, and I get to work with people like you, Bronwyn. So like, life is
Bring
good.
so much to the
Life
industry.
is good.
I mean, you
Yeah.
have been a
So yeah.
destination for the industry. Thank you for that.
Well, I'm trying to keep up with you, Bronwyn. I'm pedaling hard. I'm pedaling fast. I don't know I'll ever be able to do that, but great to have you as a friend and partner. And so tell everybody, Bronwyn, how can they learn more about you? How can they find you as we kind of sign off for this show?
The best way to get me is on LinkedIn. You Bronwyn Warrior. You'll see me there. It talks about both companies, and it's got links to everything. And then we have pages. There's an Airversity Drone Academy page that includes Air Echo, and then there's also the Zio Air page, and of course there's zioair.com and there's airversity.com, and we are primarily on Instagram and X, at Airversity 107 and at Zio Air on Instagram and at AirZio. That's a long story
Yeah.
on X. So a lot of places that you can connect.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we look forward to obviously following you. I already do. For those that are not following Bronwyn, you absolutely should. Stay tuned for more. Like I said, drone coming sometime next year. Some awesome, a smart drone, by the way, resilient, weather resilient, I'll call it. Um, Long distance. Who knows what this thing is going to be hybrid or hydrogen. I'm really curious. You've piqued my curiosity in a big way. And then, of course, you know, the software and everything. It's no wonder she picked this month to be on the show. We were talking earlier in the year about this. It was like, hey, I'm going to be doing a Grant Drone. I'm like, all right, you need to be on this month. So all perfect. All right, everybody, we are at time. So great. Time flies talking to Bronwyn Morgan, as always. So awesome to have you on the show. Thanks, everybody. We are out here.